Welcome back to Hexen Studios, where we take marketing to the power of X. We're joined today with Chris Combs, Managing Partner, and Matt Brown, Senior Associate at Combs Waterkotte Law Firm here in St. Louis, Missouri. Now today we're going to talk about expungement. Can one of you explain to me what expungement actually is?
Sure. So first and foremost, I think it's really important for everyone to know that you have four types of records. Everyone has an arrest record, a criminal record, a driving record, and then a DFS, CPS, Child Protective Services, Department of Family Services record. So when we're speaking specifically about expungements, you're talking about expunging an arrest record. So that's important to note. But an expungement is expunging your arrest record.
And can a felony be expunged?
Certain felonies can be expunged. Another common misconception when you're hiring a criminal defense attorney is we are here to protect your freedom, your liberty, your criminal record. But the second you're fingerprinted, that arrest record is created. So you have to wait some time to go back, petition the court to get the arrest record expunged.
Let's talk about misdemeanors. How long do they stay on your record?
So any conviction that you have, whether it be a felony or misdemeanor, is going to stay on your record, on your criminal record, until you get it expunged. There's no set time frame in Missouri. Some states say, after 7 years, this could fall off. In Missouri, that's not the case. So any misdemeanor or felony conviction that you have is going to stay on your record indefinitely unless you get it expunged.
Does every state differ with that rule?
Every state has its own rules, yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm licensed to practice here in the state of Missouri, so if you have a felony or misdemeanor conviction in another state, you would need to contact an attorney in that state. But each state can differ and certainly does differ on their requirements.
We talked about felony charges. Do they ever go away?
Certain felony charges, and there's just too many to list. You can go to our website for more information.
And what is that website?
Sorry. CombsWaterkotte.com.
Okay.
But yeah, certain felonies can be expunged. And the timeline on misdemeanors and felony expungements is after the case is concluded. So if you have probation, it's after probation is concluded. When the case is closed, it's you have to wait a year to get a misdemeanor arrest expunged and 3 years on a felony.
What's the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony?
Well, the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony, one is most commonly is the severity of the crime, but what really differs or makes the misdemeanor separate from a felony is the range of punishment. A misdemeanor, the maximum range of punishment you're looking at is a year in the county jail, whereas on a felony, obviously the time that you can spend locked up greatly exceeds that. For example, a Class E felony, which is the lowest level felony we have in Missouri, the range of punishment is up to 4 years in prison. So the short answer is the maximum amount of time or punishment that you can receive is what differentiates a felony from a misdemeanor.
So are there any crimes here in Missouri that cannot be expunged?
There's several types of crimes in Missouri that can't be expunged. And again, for a comprehensive look at that, you can refer to our website at CombsWaterkotte.com. But a short answer is most are violent crimes cannot be expunged. Class A felonies cannot be expunged. Most sex crimes cannot be expunged. And crimes against persons, again, depending on the severity, and those types of cases cannot be expunged from your record.
Okay, so let's talk about cost. Money is always a big topic for everybody in life. How much would it cost if I wanted to expunge something in Missouri?
Sure. So a lot is baked into that, but the filing fee alone, we have to draft a petition and file it, but the filing fee alone, is about $300 to $500 depending on the jurisdiction. Now we go all over the state, so obviously that would vary in cost, but your average cost for us to draft a petition, file it, then we have to prepare our client for a full-blown hearing, have the hearing, get the order of expungement, and serve that on all the proper agencies so they know to expunge the arrest. You're typically looking at about $3,500, and again, that can go up or down, slightly depending on the situation.
Do you find that you're handling more clients that need you to defend them or expunge their record?
I would say we certainly are handling way more people who need a defense team who've been charged with a crime. However, we have seen a major uptick in people contacting us for expungements. And one of the reasons for that is Missouri used to only have one expungement statute where you had to prove actual innocence of the crime to get your arrest record expunged. There's now 3 separate expungement statutes, and it has relaxed quite a bit, and there's a lot more crimes that are eligible for expungement. So, and again, it can affect housing, job, employment opportunities. So it's certainly, we get a lot of calls for it, but no, we represent a lot more people charged of crimes than people calling for expungements.
All right, so let's say someone's record has been expunged. How long until they will actually see it being cleared on their record?
Well, that depends. There's several agencies that are named in the expungement. You're talking your local police municipality, the local sheriff's department, the prosecuting attorney's office, in some cases the FBI, the Regis Commission. So it varies. Once we get to court, from start to finish, for us to do what we need to do to get to court, you're probably looking at about 120 to 180 days, and that varies depending on the judge's calendar. Once we get that order of expungement, and then we send that off to the various agencies that need to expunge your record, at that point it's out of our hands, and it can vary. Some agencies can have your record wiped in 2 weeks. Some it could take several months. It just depends on how efficient that particular agency is.
Does your record actually clear, let's say, after 7 years?
No, that's again a common misconception in Missouri. So your arrest record and your criminal record never goes away. It's always going to follow you around unless you have it expunged. So there's no amount of time that you can wait it out and say, okay, after 7 years, I'm good to go. My record's clean. That's not the case. Your record will only be cleaned if you get that particular offense expunged from your record.
Don't they say that like every 7 years your taste buds change? It's not as easy as that, right?
Definitely not as easy as that, no.
Yeah.
And I think the 7-year common misconception came from, you used to see, years ago, a decade ago on job applications, have you, the only background criminal question used to be, have you been convicted of a felony in the last 7 years? And I think that's where people got the 7 years from, I'm guessing. But if anyone's looked at a job application lately, it's, have you been stopped, detained, arrested, pled no contest? They ask pretty all-encompassing questions these days.
Can they also ask, have you ever expunged your record?
I've seen that, but that is, that's as you get into higher level type professions.
Okay.
Of course, if you want to be an attorney, that's certainly a question they're going to ask. You have to provide your fingerprints and things like that. I'm sure if you want to be a doctor or work in government, that's things that, is probably never going to go away.
So if I'm getting fingerprinted, you're saying that my fingerprints could show expunged records?
It depends on who you're doing the fingerprints for.
My kid's school for a art and craft day.
Well, it shouldn't show up
Shouldn't
then.
show okay, great. Any other time outside of?
Depending on what employer, if you're getting fingerprinted from an employer and your record's been expunged, then no, it should not show up at all. Now, there's always going to be certain agencies, criminal justice agencies, that even though your record's been expunged, they're still going to be able to see it. Your run-of-the-mill employer, unless you're looking at some kind of high government security clearance, it's not going to show up on your record at all.
Okay, so fast food, you're probably fine. Secret Service, it'd probably show up.
Probably so, yes.
Okay, just making sure we're clear.
And
All
I
right.
think what's important to note there is when you're getting an order for expungement, it's coming from a circuit court state judge. And one of the agencies you're serving that upon is the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, which is the FBI, federal database.
Okay.
So the supremacy clause in the United States Constitution, federal law trumps state. So sometimes they honor it, sometimes they do not. So the NCIC, on occasion can ignore that expungement order.
Can I get a DWI or a DUI expunged?
So yes, most importantly to point out is that DWI and DUI are pretty much used interchangeably in the state of Missouri. except for it's by drug intoxication, then it's typically a DWI, but it's the same thing in effect. Yes, you can get one DWI expunged after 10 years, and you cannot have any alcohol-related offenses during those 10 years. And the reason for that, and the reason behind the legislature is, they want to keep track of people who are racking up DWIs, of course. So yes, but only one after 10 years.
Are there any exceptions to the rule?
No, that is a hard and fast rule for now in the state of Missouri.
Okay. So can misdemeanors be expunged?
Oh, absolutely. Misdemeanors can be expunged. There's statutory requirements that need to be met, and there's some misdemeanors that may not be expungible, but in general, misdemeanors can be expunged, absolutely.
And how long does expungement take?
The expungement process, typically what we tell our clients, plan on somewhere between 120 to 180 days. That obviously varies between jurisdiction and courts. We can control a lot of things, but we can't control a judge's calendar. So from our standpoint, the amount of time that it takes, we typically look at about 120 to 180 days.
And if you could control a judge's calendar, you would be priceless.
I would probably get a lot more clients, yes.
You probably would, yes. So who can actually see expunged records?
So when your record is expunged, a majority, if not a large majority of places aren't going to be able to see your record that's been expunged. There's always going to be certain government agencies or criminal justice agencies that are going to be able to see your record. Prosecuting attorney's office, obviously most federal government agencies are still going to be able to see your record. So it's not completely sealed from everybody, but your typical run-of-the-mill employers, they're not ever going to be able to see your expunged record.
Okay, we talk about sealing. Would it be sealed from me, or is there a way that I can actually see if it's been expunged?
You can always go and request your own criminal background check through the Missouri Highway Patrol. I know there's different places available online that you can pay money to. I would never trust those to be accurate. But if you ever wanted to check out your own criminal record, especially after an expungement, to see if those things have fallen off, you can always go through the Missouri Highway Patrol and request a criminal background check and see if that information has fallen off your record.
And the lawyer who would help you with that process, would they always have access to it?
We have access to certain programs that we run. We run a Regis program that we can type in your information that gives us some of your background information, some of those criminal records. But again, it's always the most valuable background check that we'll get is done through the Missouri Highway Patrol.
So let's say my record has been expunged, but you said that the prosecutor has access to it later. Can they use it against me in a future trial?
They can't use your expunged record against you. Once you have your record expunged, it essentially takes you back before you ever have that conviction, and you're put back into the place that you were prior to that conviction. While a prosecutor or some other kind of criminal justice agency can see that and still has access to those records, they cannot then come back and use an expunged conviction for enhancement purposes. So for example, if you had a drug crime expunged from your record and you go out and commit another drug crime, they being the prosecuting attorney's office, cannot look at your past expunged drug conviction and say, okay, now you're a repeat felon, so we can enhance any potential punishments against you. So while they can see it, they cannot use it against you for enhancement purposes.
What would be the purpose for them actually seeing it? What benefit does that bring to them?
Well, it's beneficial to the prosecutor for bond purposes because they always want to know what your background's like. Mm-hmm. And of course, they're going to argue that even though you had this record expunged, you've committed crimes in the past. You're a more danger to the community, and then they also will more than likely use it for negotiation purposes. They'll probably be less likely to negotiate a favorable outcome if your client has had past convictions.
So just having that knowledge is beneficial, even though they cannot use it.
Absolutely, it's very beneficial to them.
Let's talk about background checks. Would an expunged record actually show up when you get fingerprinted?
No, and that's the whole purpose of expunging your record, so it doesn't show up on a background check. So if it's done properly and all the proper agencies have been served, then no, any record, whether it be an arrest record or a criminal record that gets expunged, would not show up on a background check.
Is there a way for me personally to expunge myself, or do I need the assistance of a lawyer?
Well, we always recommend getting the assistance of a lawyer. Courts will oftentimes have forms available that you can fill out yourself and try to do the process yourself. But one thing that we always caution people calling in and asking us about expungements is it's very specific. The steps are very specific on what you need to do, who you need to get served, who needs to be a party to the case. And if you mess that up, the judge has to deny your petition for an expungement. If your petition for expungement gets denied, you then have to wait an entire year before then you can repetition the court. So yes, it is certainly possible to do it yourself, but we always recommend, obviously, for those reasons I just stated, and it takes the stress off the client, having to do these things themselves and make sure they dot every I and cross every T, because again, if you mess that up, the judge has no choice but to deny it, and then you're stuck waiting an additional year before you can even repetition the court.
Just adds more stress to an already difficult situation.
Absolutely. Let us take the stress off you, and we'll get it handled for you.
So is it actually worth getting your record expunged?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the most important tools, particularly with the Missouri legislature opening up way more offenses, than they were eligible before to get expunged. Of course, if you get a criminal record expunged, housing, employment, and just your life in general will be much easier, when you don't have a criminal record following you around.
So an employer can't use an expungement against you?
No, they cannot.
They actually don't have access to that information in the first place, is that correct?
For the most part, yes. Now, of course, I can't speak for every employer and every background check company out there, but for the most part, yes. Now, again, as you go up, to higher level professions, doctor, lawyer, security clearance at, Boeing or some type of, national safety or, things like that, then of course I'm sure they'll be able to see it. But no, for the large majority, they will not be able to see it. Employers will not be able to see it.
So if I have an expunged record, how long can it be used against me?
Well, in theory, if you have your record expunged, it should never be able to be used against you. Now, there's always going to be certain agencies, criminal justice agencies, that are going to have access to even an expunged record. On paper, are they using it against you? They shouldn't be. From a practical standpoint, can an expunged record be used against you? I'm sure there are certain times where it will always be continued to use against you. If you go out and commit another crime, a prosecutor is going to have access to your expunged record. That, while they cannot use it against you for enhancement purposes or enhancing the punishment against you, they'll certainly use it against you as far as negotiations go for any kind of plea offers, and certainly any bond settings, keeping the community safe. So we need to set a higher bond, because even though you had your record expunged, they see that you've committed crimes in the past. So in theory, it should not be used against you. From a practical standpoint, there's always going to be situations and certain agencies that are going to see it, that are going to use it against you.
So if someone's convicted, how long will it take for something to be expunged after that conviction?
Sure, great question. So for a misdemeanor, and again, it's a common misconception, is it when I plead guilty? When does the clock start ticking? It's when your probationary period has concluded, when you have successfully completed probation. On a misdemeanor, it is 1 year from the date that you successfully complete probation. On a felony, it is 3 years.
If I have an expunged record, do I actually have to disclose that to anybody?
The answer to that is no. Even if you're filling out some kind of application that specifically says, have you ever had your record expunged, legally you can mark no, because that's not an employer does not have a right to know that. Will an employer potentially ask you that? They can ask you that, but you don't have to say yes. You can give them the answer no, because that's the whole part of an expungement is getting your record expunged and sealed, so you don't have to then disclose that later on down the road in situations.
So if I'm looking into and interested in expungement, how do I actually know if I qualify?
So obviously the first step would be to call our office, 314-900-HELP. That's 314-900-4357. We're happy to give you a free consultation. Otherwise, you could do the research yourself, but when you can call us and get a straight answer when we do this every day, because there is a list of ineligible crimes. And again, Missouri went from 1 expungement statute to 3. So knowing which statute to apply and also what's eligible and what's not, for free, you can call us up and we'll do that for you.
And you have reassurance that you're talking to someone who knows what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of wasting your time trying to research it yourself.
So if I have an arrest record, can that be expunged?
Yeah, absolutely. There are certain situations where an arrest record can get expunged. Typically, if you're getting your conviction expunged, it's going to expunge everything, including the arrest. Now, there are also times where you get arrested for something, but you don't get a conviction, meaning maybe you had a trial and won, so you're not convicted. Maybe you got arrested for something, but charges were never filed. So that would be a separate expungement of your arrest record, and that is possible to do under certain situations, absolutely.
So just to be clear, what things can actually be expunged?
On your arrest record, it would expunge the actual arrest.
Okay.
And your arrest record a lot of times it's going to be different than your criminal record. Because when you get arrested, the officer's going to input into their data system why they felt like they arrested you. So, but that could be different from the actual charge that you get charged with and go to court for. So your arrest record, all of that can be expunged under certain circumstances. Now, what can be expunged as far as your criminal record goes, again, that's going to depend on the type of charge that you've been convicted of. There's a laundry list of felonies that cannot be expunged. There's a short list of misdemeanors that can't be expunged. All Class A felonies cannot be expunged. Sex crimes cannot be expunged. Violent crimes cannot be expunged. So the easiest thing to do is pick up the phone, give us a call. We'll run down that whole list for you and let you know if you're eligible for an expungement.
So you're talking about arrest and conviction. Is that you have to be expunged 2 times? Or is it just expungement? Let's say you get arrested but not convicted, then you get expunged. You can try for arrest. Let's say you're convicted. Do you get expunged for the conviction and the arrest?
Yeah, we try to cover if you're expunging your arrest, or excuse me, if you're expunging your conviction, your criminal record, we just kind of lump that in, and we request that anything related to that conviction, including the arrest, be expunged as well. And that's why it's important when you do these things that you're filing the petition and you're including the agency that arrested you, because the agency that arrested you could be a small local municipality, but you're actually going to court somewhere else. So that's why it's very important that when you do this, you include all those agencies that have access to those records or that had a hand in your conviction or your arrest.
Mm-hmm. And why not hire someone who does that for a living and knows what questions to ask?
Absolutely. Yeah. Give us a call. We'll be more than happy to help you.
So tell me, what is actually an expungement record?
So an expungement is essentially wiping away your criminal record or your arrest record. So when we talk about expunging a record, we're talking about putting you back in the place that you were prior to you either getting arrested or going to court. And when I mean putting back into the place, it means restoring all your rights that you had prior to either getting arrested or taking a conviction. So that's what we mean when we talk about an expungement record.
Will expunged records have any effect on a security clearance?
It potentially can. Again, a majority of your employers or people that run background checks on you, your expunged record is not going to show up. There's always going to be certain criminal justice agencies that are going to have access to your expunged record. Anytime you're trying to get a government job, especially if there's some kind of high security clearance involved, and understandably so, your expunged record is still going to be accessible and still show up when you're seeking some kind of high security clearance background.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure our viewers have learned an immense amount of information that could help them, their family, their friends. And if you want to learn more, check back here or at combswaterkotte.com, or you can contact them directly at 314-900-HELP. That's 314-900-HELP. We'll see you next time.